Welcome to Political Beatdown. I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Cohen. You want to talk about an end of the year beatdown? How about this end of the year beatdown that Donald Trump is receiving from the American people, especially among independents? The New Economist YouGov poll, Trump's net approval among independents of Trump's handling at the start of this stage of his presidency. In his second term, it started at -4, and now he's at -36 versus first term +8, -7. Just think about that right now. For those who are listening on audio, you have to look at this chart because it looks like a Trump meme coin of his net approval among independents. And I think, one
It
of the
looks like
things.
an EKG right before you go into a full cardiac arrest.
Exactly. And look, I just think one of the trends that I'm seeing is that, just people who aren't even political observers, but people who are looking at the end of the year and just reflecting on what the hell has happened are looking at this and saying, this is dangerous what Trump's doing. It's also really weird. And this whole ecosystem built around trying to hoist Donald Trump as this authoritarian Führer figure, people are like, what is this? I mean, like I know people don't like when I report on what's going on state regime media, Fox, but it gives you a window into just where this cult is going, because we need to know how we got here and how we got out. So Cohen,
Also, in all fairness, Ben, how we never get back to this place. I mean, they always say that, history is extremely important to learn, even though in America, nobody really understands or nobody really studies history as much as we should. You go to other countries, they know the history starting at the very beginning, and they have a history hundreds of years longer than ours. History is so important because it teaches us, all right, what you don't want to happen ever again. And if we don't actually do that, we could get stuck in another situation with another individual who is ego driven as opposed to constitution driven.
Look, to me, if you were to go back into America's founding, right, and you were to say among the various things, what defined America's founding, right? What was it, right? And you could say the Declaration of Independence, and you could say the Revolutionary War, you could say all these things, but to me, the common theme, frankly, is no kings, no authoritarians, right?
Yeah.
The US implemented the enlightened teaching that was going on in Europe at that time as a reaction to kings and authoritarians, and leading the way with a very imperfect democracy. I'm not going to be here and be like, America crushed it, like it was always amazing. No. I mean, there were bad times in our history, and there were terrible things that were done. But the arc of this idea of democracy and moving away from authoritarianism, that was a significant thing. And then spreading democracy across a world that was defined by authoritarianism. And now what we're seeing is an international authoritarian movement of the Putins and the Orbans and the Trumps and the people like that. And you have to view this in a historical context as that this is a wave, a generational wave saying democracy had its moment, and now the authoritarians want to get back into power, right, as they always did. And they view the proliferation of unregulated AI, data centers, the proliferation of information paradoxically causing bad information as a tool to create a lord versus subject dynamic.
Ben, one of the crazy things that most people aren't aware of, and I'm shocked at the number of people who are not, is the fact that George Washington is not famous in U.S. history because, he crossed the Delaware or as the first president of the United States. He's really most famous for the fact that they wanted him to be president for the entire term of his life. And he said no, that we just fought a war not to have a king. And it's so important that people understand, what would you have given that up? I remember when I first learned about the story, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm not sure if somebody offered me to be, in essence, the king of a country, that I would walk away from it. Think about the type of man that George Washington was, in order to turn around to say, we just fought a war against England for our freedom. And I have no interest in copying what so many have died for. It is a truly, truly incredible attribute that George Washington possessed, which is why he is so revered, which is why he is on, currency like a quarter or the dollar bill and so on. It is to honor that sort of moral high ground that we do not see coming out of Washington today.
Right. And then you see state regime media, Fox, they're out there and they refer to Donald Trump as daddy. And it's a very strange thing. And it's not just every now and then. They consistently refer to Donald Trump as daddy, 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 daddy said this, daddy said that. Like, it's deeply disturbing. There are people who are getting their news from this network who are hearing hosts say, let me put this in ways that you can understand. Daddy's cutting you off right now. And just before we started, there's this new guest contributor who shows up a lot. Sunshine is her name. And she seems to be auditioning for Caroline Leavitt's job, or a job like that in the White House. And here's what she says about daddy. And she calls him daddy. Here, play this clip.
Let me try to put this in terms that Gavin Newsom will understand. Donald Trump is daddy, and daddy cut you off. And daddy said you can't use his credit card anymore. Because why should California and Gavin Newsom be getting federal funds when they don't even follow federal law? Nobody is obstructing federal immigration law more than the state of California and Gavin Newsom. You don't get a penny if you're not going to enforce federal law.
Okay, time out. First of all, here's the biggest problem. Ben, join me on this for a second, please, because we have talked about on this Political Beatdown show during the course of 2025, we have talked about the various states that are fund givers, and then we have those that are fund recipients.
Yep.
New York, California, I believe Virginia,
Illinois, Massachusetts,
right, Illinois, right, exactly. Massachusetts, they are states, they happen to be blue, that pay more to the federal government than they receive. So when people like Caroline Sunshine, and I know nothing about her, I don't even know where she came from, I don't know what her history is, what her background is, but you're not wrong when you say that she's obviously trying out for Caroline Leavitt's role. When you start turning around and making statements like that, that we are not, that Texas, or I should say California or New York, are not following federal law, in this case specifically California under Gavin Newsom, I'd be very, very curious as to, one, what she's even talking about. What federal law are they not following? And two, I'd be very curious whether there is a way within which California could withhold sending money to the federal government until its needs are met. And those needs are, again, from the wildfires and from the various flooding that has taken place.
I am, would it shock you that this Caroline Sunshine lived in California?
Actually, it would. Yeah.
So I'm just looking at her background. So she was born in 1995. She previously worked for Trump in 2018. So would she have been in her 20s there when she worked for Trump? She was an actress.
Doing what?
She let's see what it says, what her role was in the first Trump administration. It's she just says White House staffer. I'm not sure what the role was.
Got it.
I'll go look into that. She was raised in Orange County, California. So grew up in California. Families from California. She was an actress. I mean, this there she is. Let's see if we could try to find the photo. That's a horrible way of showing photos, especially when I have an editorial team I can send them. But she had some role, or she showed up at the world premiere of Cars 2. She wasn't in Cars 2 though, but she was a child actress, and now she's an ultra MAGA. She was in a movie called The Outfield, and now this is what she's doing. So isn't that a common theme though of MAGA too? Like people who couldn't become actresses and then they go kind of MAGA and they act there. Like like Lauren Boebert, she was on like one of those like model websites, and like they all wanted to be famous somehow, and this was kind of their path to being famous. But in any event, California, if it was a country, would be the 4th largest GDP in the world. So a bigger economy than Canada or Japan, most countries, right? It gives $85 billion to the federal government, more than it takes, right? Whereas Texas takes $85 billion more than it gives. California literally keeps the red states alive. California literally subsidizes the existence of most red states. Most red states are failed states. They literally couldn't exist. They don't have balanced budgets. They are the worst in every category, whether it's education, standard of living, economic conditions, you name it. They're like the crime, like they're usually the worst in basically every category. And California props it up along with most blue states. And so the bigger question should be, well, why is California paying federal taxes and giving money to the federal government if it gets attacked by the federal government that it props up? And then remember when all these MAGA people back in the day where they were, states' rights, we're states' rights. And now it's like, and they would always be like, Michelle Obama, she wants to change. She's recommending healthier food for kids. That's like an invasion. They're invading our schools, the federal. Don't tread on me. And they have their flags with the don't tread on me.
Remember that?
Snakes. Michelle Obama's invading. And then it's like, okay, RFK has a weirder version that he calls Make America Healthy Again, which you hated when Michelle Obama did it as recommendations. Now you want that mandatory while he stops vaccines and stops the vaccine advisory board. And now you want the federal government to invade blue states. Cohen, at the end of the day, when any one of these MAGAs, they come up with their frameworks, right? Where they're like, we're states' rights. We're originalists. We're strict constructionists. Remember, their frameworks are just evidence of their sociopathy. They just want to create a situation where they rig the outcome by putting it through a framework. Oh, yes, we're strict constructionists. Every word matters. Okay, every word matters. Then why does the Second Amendment say well-regulated, the only amendment that uses the word regulation? But then you go, you can't use the word regulate.
Why does the First Amendment turn around and give you the freedom of speech until you're standing on a street corner yelling at ICE for disappearing people, and they shoot you in the top of the head with a pepper bullet, right? Or they unconstitutionally remand you to prison because you refuse not to write a book and not to talk about it on social media or television. Yeah, that's the problem. What's good for them is what they want. But if it's good for you, well, that's a violation of their rights. We're really in a very dangerous place. And the danger is not just on our national stage. That's pretty screwed up. But the international stage takes it to a whole nother level, because when they're doing the things that they're doing, like blowing up these boats. And by the way, Ben, you do remember, even on this show, we talked about how I had heard from a buddy of mine who is former military intelligence that he knows for a fact that we have boots on the ground in Venezuela. But what's interesting is when I spoke to a member of Congress, he said he believes that that's right. He's heard from other people as well, but he has not heard from the administration, all right, that we have boots on the ground in Venezuela. Well, I think that they confirmed it just the other day that they're striking now, locations inside of Venezuela, not to mention that they just blew up a whole bunch of boats at the dock that they claim that it's being used to, to load the drugs onto these 18, 20-foot aluminum boats that are going nowhere. The whole thing, honestly, it's almost like a bad South Park episode, right? If this was even a South Park episode, I think they would turn and say, it's so stupid that we actually just can't even, we can't even put this one out. It's that ridiculous.
You saw the New York Times expose this morning as one of those fishing boats was arrived on the shore of Colombia. Here's what it says. Grim evidence of Trump's airstrikes washes ashore on a Colombian peninsula. And it said, first came the scorched boat, then the mangled bodies, then the packets with traces of marijuana. Now fishermen fear the ocean that feeds them. And it talks about how this boat, no bigger than 30 feet long, was all destroyed and scorched with 2 mangled bodies in them. Then there were these charred jerry cans, and then in these cans, these packets were found there, but what was in them appeared to be traces of something that looked and smelled like marijuana. First off, there was never any doubt at all that there was no fentanyl on those ships, which is the pretext. The pretext was that there's fentanyl and these are narco terrorists. And then Trump lies and says, for every boat we destroy, we save 25 or 50,000 lives of Americans. That's right out of a Putin playbook, right? That's Putin saying, look, my home was attacked by Zelensky, and now Zelensky's a terrorist. And so we have to stop the terrorist state. It's the exact, almost word for word, playbook. Okay. By the way, Trump tried to pull the same fentanyl, and Canada resisted and stood up to it. But Trump pulled the same thing with Canada. They're trying. His justification for tariffs against Canada and initiating the trade war was Canada is killing Americans with fentanyl. They're killing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. So we always knew these fishing boats did not have fentanyl.
And what makes this unusually grotesque is the fact that it was traces of marijuana, whether it's the smell or whatever particles may remain inside those canisters. The thing, in the United States of America right now, you have multinational companies, cannabis companies. You can't walk down Lexington Avenue or 3rd Avenue or 2nd Avenue here in Manhattan without on every other street corner, they have a place that's literally legally selling to anybody over the age of 18 marijuana, cannabis, whether it's THC, CBD, both, whether it's in vape pens, who knows, whether it's gummies, right? And yet you don't see them blowing up the headquarters to a cannabis company. You don't see them when the CEO of that cannabis company is driving home to his estate in the Hamptons or whatnot, that a drone takes him out on I-95 or 495. Seriously? So here you have these 20, 30-foot boats. I thought they were more like 20-footers. But if you say 30, I'm willing to go with 30. Evidence. This is real, actual evidence. A lot of people get angry at me. They say, oh, you make these comments and so on, and you're not really sure. As a former lawyer, right, or as a lawyer with legal training, as is Ben, we go off of facts. These are not pictures of boats that are AI created or that you can get by going through a booklet to pick out which 20 or 30-foot aluminum boat that you want to buy. These are the actual boats that have washed on shore, and they contain what they contain. These are facts, plain and simple. These are facts. We live by facts. And you know what? Just imagine instead of it being a boat, just make it into a car or make it into an office building. And then next thing they're doing, they're going to start sending drones to blow up these buildings or take out the vehicles of these CEOs and these top executives at cannabis companies. Ben, you're 1,000% right. They are using lies within which to promote a theme that actually is a lie.
And they're not explaining what the end game is here. They're saying what they say about Venezuela
change.
recently. The Venezuela, now they're saying actually they stole our oil, what Trump's saying, and they stole our land, so we need it back. By the way, right out of Putin's playbook. And for all our people in the corporate media news, who were like, they're moving closer to peace between, Ukraine and Russia. I say, are you listening to anything that Putin, Lavrov, Dmitriev, Yushakov, Peskov, are you listening to what they're saying? The Russians have not once this entire year made any statement that they want a legitimate peace deal with Ukraine. The entire year, Ukraine has been very clear. We agree to a ceasefire. We'll stop. We've been invaded. There's nothing to stop. We want a ceasefire. We agree. The moment there's a ceasefire, this ends. We agree. Ceasefire. Russia says, no, this is Russia's recent statement before the meeting between Zelensky and Trump this weekend. Russia says, and this came through Yushakov, the main kind of Russian negotiator working with Witkov, that any ceasefire is unacceptable because it would lead to a, quote, prolongation of the war. That the ceasefire, the cessation of the war, creates the war. That is literally 1984, war is peace or peace is war. That's what they're saying. So
except Trump turns around, Ben, and says that according to Putin, he wants to see Ukraine succeed. I literally almost choked on my coffee when I heard that come out of his mouth. That he says Putin claims he wants to see Ukraine succeed. I don't even know where to go from that one.
And I think we have the clip of that, Jeremy, if we've got it. It's the one let's show the one where Zelensky is listening as Donald Trump says that, look, Putin really just wants to help you. So if he takes you over, he strongly wants to help you. Trump always says strongly. I believe him. Very strongly wants to help you. Let's play this clip and let's watch Zelensky's reaction to it. Here, play this clip.
So in your conversation with President Putin, did you discuss what responsibility Russia will have for any kind of reconstruction of Ukraine post an agreement?
I did. They're going to be helping. Russia's going to be helping. Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed. Once, it sounds a little strange, but I was explaining to the president, President Putin was very generous in his feeling toward Ukraine succeeding, including supplying energy, electricity, and other things at very low prices. So a lot of good things came out of that call today, but they were in the works for 2 weeks with.
So could you imagine?
He's going to take over Ukraine.
Did you see Zelensky says, sure, he wants them to succeed. That was literally right after 10 hours of relentless shelling and bombing in Kiev with more death and more destruction. But sure, here's an idea. Let's blow up Ukraine's energy grid so that we can sell them energy cheap. I mean, this to me reminds me so much of a Crazy Eddie commercial. I was waiting for Eddie Avedon, right, to come on and say, but wait, there's more, right? If you act now, you're going to get another 15% off the energy that we're selling you because we blew up your energy. We blew up your electric grids and so on. This is the craziest shit on the planet. Oh, sure, Russia wants to help go to rebuild Ukraine. I want to be clear about something because, again, to those of you who, maybe aren't as familiar with Eastern Europe, for example, as I might be, right? It's Russia has no money. Russia's economy is in the toilet. Their big export, as you all know, is oil. But their cost to retrieve the oil per barrel is between $56 and $57 per barrel. If right now spot price is around 59, how much money do you think that they're making off of that $2 VIG? And the answer is not enough. Not nearly enough to sustain this war. Not nearly enough for their people to receive benefits that they may need. All right. Because again, remember, you're not talking about a country like the United States of America with a $28 trillion GDP, right? You're talking about, I don't even know what Russia's is right now. It's like what, 1 trillion?
2.5 to 2.7.
2.5 trillion, right? You're talking about 1/10 the size of the United States. I just want people to understand that. So they're not in a financial position to give $1 to Ukraine. Where this entire bullshit came from, this info, this conversation. By the way, one last thing, Ben. When these telephone calls take place, aren't they recorded and then transcribed? Isn't that phone call the property of the United States, the people of the United States, the American citizens? I'd like to read that 2.5-hour transcript. I would like to know exactly what they talked about, because there is no fucking way in the world that Vladimir Putin turned around and said he wants to see Ukraine succeed and that they intend to help in the rebuilding of Ukraine unless they own it completely.
Yeah, I believe, and I'm giving you my opinion, that whether it was discussed on a recorded line or not on a recorded line, I believe that Putin told Trump what the plan was going to be in the next 24 hours, that Putin was going to claim that Zelensky attacked his home, which would then be used as pretext by Russia to try and attack Ukrainian government buildings and to try to assassinate and kill Zelensky. And that, I believe, is what Russia is trying to do. They've always been trying to do it, but I think that part of the tactics here that were at play and were taking place behind closed doors is Trump saying to Zelensky, you better give up your eastern territory or else I'm not going to be able to stop him. I'm not going to be able to I can't tell you what's coming next, but all I can tell you is that, it would be nice if you're around. I think that's what went down when Donald Trump told the media to leave. I'm giving you my hypothesis based on all of the surrounding circumstances, because the very next day on Monday, you wake up and what happens? Putin goes, Zelensky tried to attack my home. Now, let's be clear. If Zelensky sent a drone swarm at Putin's home, first off, if I've looked at these maps that these open source military sites post, there's 4 or 5 touch points where the drones would be shot at by Russia's kind of drone defense. So I'm not saying that, Ukrainian drones couldn't have evaded it, but people in the communities would have seen some activity, and then they would have seen activity around Putin's home. Like, imagine if by the White House there was a drone swarm, right? There would be something like, okay, did you see that? Did you see, it's not like in some isolated area. Like, did you see what just happened? And by the way, our own intelligence in the United States and European intelligence would have confirmed that, because we have satellites there. We would be aware that that's what was taking place. But no, that was pretext. And what was it pretext to? Because Zelensky, I think, did a very good job with Europe calling Donald Trump and Putin's bluff. And Zelensky says, look, we're open to a territorial concession. We'll give a portion of, you want Donbass? You want some of the areas of eastern Ukraine? Okay, but here's how we're going to do it. Let's all agree to a 60 to 90 day ceasefire, because how could we give it up if there's no ceasefire? And then let's put a vote to the public, and let's make it a free and fair vote, and let the Ukrainians vote. Do they want to be Ukrainian?
Which, by the way, is part of their constitution.
Which is exactly. Or do they want to be Russian? And that's when Putin was like, all right, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Let's say he attacked us. Let's say that he attacked and he broke up the settlement. But it's a the broader point I want to make here is it's a very peace is war, war is peace, 1984 Trumpian tactic. Because then Putin's like, we're going to have we're going to have to proceed differently now in these negotiations with this terroristic regime. And Cohen, though, if you look at the rest of the world, I mean, we're talking about Ukraine, and rightfully so, but like even today, did you catch the news this morning that there were Saudi Arabian airstrikes in the southern area of Yemen that were targeting a group that's like a separatist group, but it was really targeting UAE. UAE had a presence there where previously they were working with Saudi Arabia against the Houthis in the Yemen area. But now Saudi Arabia accuses UAE of working with the separatist group against the Saudi control in Yemen. And so the Saudis did a strike that was basically a strike at the UAE, and UAE's pissed. And never before have you had the Saudis and the UAE in this direct conflict like this.
Everybody's in conflict.
Everybody's in
conflict. You got China now making moves, which Trump says, well, they've been doing it for 20 years, maybe longer, right? Much more significant, much bigger, right, than what's going on now out right in off the shores of Taiwan. I mean, you have, Trump making still claims about taking Greenland. Whatever happened, by the way, to our invasion of Panama? Because, that's been stolen from us. Or,
well, you remember this, Cohen? You remember when a Kim Jong-un cruise missile test under Obama would be used by all the right wing to say, look how weak Obama is.
Yep.
Like, you're letting Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-un just tested his long-range missiles in coordination with China's tests around Taiwan, and it doesn't get a blip. It gets a blip maybe from some of these like military open source sites that INU and the Midas Touch Network follows. But that was the big right-wing talking point. Yeah. Obama's weak. You're going to let Kim Jong-un do these tests? Yeah,
look,
that happened.
Ben, here's the whole thing. And I know each and every one of you are going to understand and acknowledge what I'm about to say. For the last, let's just say, 80 years, right? There has been an adage that a strong America means a strong world. A weak America produces a weak world. Right now, we're weak. All right? America is not respected around the world. Here's what they know. From Vladimir Putin to, I don't know, to the president of South Korea, to Japan, to even companies like Apple. All you need to do is show up, or, for example, even Bibi Netanyahu with his Israel Prize, the highest award to be given to an Israeli. Or the highest Israeli award that's given. You need to show up with a shiny object, with a gift. It's like, I don't know, you want to be noticed at somebody's wedding, you show up with a big gift. That's what it is. Whether it is a Tim Cook 5-pound piece of gold that is the base of a trophy, or it is a gold crown, or if you cut her, you give a $400 million aircraft, or if you FIFA, you give the FIFA award with a little object to hang around your neck. This is the problem. They all know that they can do whatever they want, that the United States under President Donald J. Trump will not interfere if you bring him a shiny object. It's really amazing. It's almost like, don't look over there. Forget the fucking missiles that are flying into Ukraine, into Kiev, that are taking out electric grids and so on. And by the way, if Ukraine sent a couple of drones into Moscow, into Red Square proper, they would have every fucking right to do it. They are at war. You're bombing Kiev, so fucking bomb Moscow. I mean, it's just that simple. Right? All of a sudden, it's like, oh, yeah, they attacked us. They attacked you because, asshole, for 4 fucking years, you have been decimating and shooting at civilians and killing people just indiscriminately because you think you can. And you can because we don't have power. We don't have power in the presidency anymore. Again, don't look over here. Look over here. And what's over here? A shiny object that we're going to give to the president of the United States. All of a sudden, your best pals. Yeah, oh, we talk all the time. He loves me. I love it. It's a love affair. Meanwhile, it's a love affair. They're shooting fucking long-range rockets. I'm talking about Kim Jong-un that can easily hit the United States. What are we doing anymore? What are we doing?
Yeah, no, the main deterrent right now to a world war is nuclear deterrence and mutually assured destruction mad. But for nuclear deterrence, there's a world war happening right now. Because again, if you look at every conflict that's just taking place this year, Russia's invasion of Ukraine accelerating, Thailand and Cambodia, China and Taiwan, Kim Jong-un in North Korea launching the missiles, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Yemen, the Houthis there attacking in the Strait of Hormuz, Israel destroying and demolishing Gaza and the massacre that's taken place there. Donald Trump is saying, it really is war is peace, right? He wants the peace. It's actually never been a more unstable world. Then you talk about Donald Trump. We had troops in Syria. When you're like, we have troops in Venezuela, we have boots on the ground in Syria because our troops in Syria, got killed recently, and Trump blamed it purely on ISIS, which he says he destroyed, but also apparently they exist there and in Nigeria. Although Donald Trump struck an area in Nigeria saying he's saving the Christians, which nobody wants to follow up and realize that ISIS doesn't target Christians in Nigeria. Muslims get hit equally or more than Christians there. And also Nigeria is more tribal than religious based, but you may want to look at the fact that the opposition leader is a Christian and may want to use that as a way to get Donald Trump to remove the governing party right now that's doing deals with China, which has lithium and oil interests in Nigeria, while the U.S. is going after Venezuela, I think it wants the oil reserves and lithium deposits in Nigeria, wants the rare earth elements of Greenland and says, we're taking over Greenland. But just listen to the words also of Marco Rubio and Donald Trump, what they've said about the world. And you hear that they've made statements that we live in a multipolar world where America isn't the leader. They've said that. I mean, go look at Rubio's speeches. Rubio says, Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States. Everything else is a vassal state, whether you're Canada, Greenland, Mexico, Central America, South America, you're subservient to the U.S. U.S. owns you and controls you if you're in the Western Hemisphere. If you're in Europe, Russia controls you. Europe, you belong to Russia. Russia controls that entire European sphere of influence. And then China controls Asia. And so we've given up protections to Japan, to South Korea. And it's interesting because you still have some people in the State Department and in the military doing their best to show support for South Korea and Japan. And so occasionally you'll get these gestures where we'll fly a plane and have it, do rounds around Japan. And then the media will be like, you see, the U.S. supported Japan right here. They'll do things like that, but then will undermine it when Donald Trump's asked a question. Jeremy, let's find this clip where Trump is asked about Xi Jinping's military exercises against Taiwan, and Trump is asked to respond to it. And Trump's like, yeah, he never told me anything about it. I have a good relationship with Xi. We have a good relationship. He never told me about it. Here, play this clip.
Doing naval exercises basically to test encircling Taiwan. Can you explain to us what your knowledge is of that? What do you think about that? Have you had any discussions with China?
Well, I have a great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it. No, nothing worries me.
But
nothing.
You said where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So if you're if you're doing naval exercises and air exercises.
Well, we've been doing naval exercises for 20 years in that area. Now people take it a little bit differently, but in fact, larger than they're doing right now. So we'll see. But they've been doing that for 20, 25 years. Yeah.
Just think about if you're
He's talking
Taiwan.
about naval exercises, about like playing with his belly button, right? So that you get the innie to be an outie and an outie to be an innie. This is some of the dumbest things I've ever heard anybody say in my entire life. I mean, there is no. So we're great friends. They're doing these naval exercises, and yet somehow or another, I don't know anything about it. But as president of the United States, I'm going to make a statement that they're not really doing anything. They don't anticipate, and I don't believe anything. I'm not worried if they do or they don't. I don't really care. But I'm going to turn around and I'm going to make a very emphatic statement that I don't believe anything is coming out of this. How about, as president of the United States, that some of these idiots that are around him, these enablers, these sycophants, these acolytes, these cabinet members, how about somebody do just a scintilla of investigation, give him his 5 talking points onto it. I'm going to be reaching out to President Xi in order to find out, what they intend. I'm going to send my Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Oops, sorry, I meant my real political genius minds, Steve Witkoff, and my idiot son-in-law, Jared. I meant my incredible son-in-law, Jared, over there, to China, because I want them to bring me back some Chinese food. I hear it's much better. I hear it's much better over there than over here. They make it with a whole lot less sodium and MSG. And so I needed to, and then all of a sudden I'm going to send them over there and we're going to find out exactly what's going on and what. But instead, they don't even say anything that's remotely normal. They turn around, they make these emphatic statements that are so damaging to our country, to the respectability of our country on the foreign stage. There really is just no way to explain anymore. There's no point in having these pressers because you're not getting legitimate answers. What you're getting is just off-the-cuff ramblings that are truly ridiculous.
Here's my view. I think with these pressers, I'd actually be okay with the media covering it and showing up if they used it as a way to fact check it right away, the way we do. Like if they said, here's what he said, and then they said, let me explain to you why everything he said is false. Not because you don't like him as the media, although you shouldn't like him, but because he's saying false things. So if they wanted to lead the evening news and say, here's what Trump said, and we're going to explain to you why it's false, because here's what's actually happening in the world, and here's the reality, and here's the objective truth. I think there's a usefulness in sending reporters, ask him the questions, have him lie, then fact check it. You could try to cross-examine him there. I'd like to see the reporters do a better job. But even if you didn't, then you go back to the studio and you say why this is a lie. And if he's telling the truth, you can say he's telling the truth. Like it doesn't always have to be.
What credit is due and hold him accountable where he's held accountable.
But what they do is they will just run the story. Donald Trump strikes ISIS in Nigeria to save the Christians on Christmas. I mean, like you realize media, you're being the Christmas gift. Like you realize that in his own demented mind, he's just creating his like Home Alone story of like what you do on Christmas, like, and then using Christians. By the way, if Donald Trump cared about Christians from Nigeria, then why is he using ICE to round him up and send him back into port? Why would you just say that the white people, the white Afrikaners from South Africa are the only group being persecuted? If you believe that Christians in Nigeria are being persecuted,
because then that's what Jesus would do.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you care about the Christians getting killed in Ukraine?
Because Jesus wouldn't care, according to MAGA.
Right. And in fact, what they'll do in Ukraine is they'll use Christianity and lie and say the Ukrainians are attacking the Christians in Ukraine and they're buying the Putin talking point.
No, the Putin theme wasn't about the Christians. It was that they're anti-Semites. And
there was a few.
Initially, it was that Putin was standing up for the Jews in Ukraine. You see, here's the problem, because there's always a scintilla of truth. to what's there, but it's the big theme, the big picture. Yes, there was tremendous anti-Semitism in Ukraine going back into the 70s, 72, 73, 74, when there was a massive, massive exodus of Jews out of Ukraine because they were told to leave. And I'm telling this to each and every one of you from firsthand experience, as my wife was born in Ukraine, lived there until she was about 6 years old. And in 1972, they were told that they have 6 months within which to leave. And so they did. They were out of there by 1973, along with waves. If you ask any Ukrainian that's, I don't know, 50 years or older, why did you leave? What year did you leave? They'll tell you 72, 73. And why? Because we were told to leave. In fact, on my wife's passport, her Ukrainian passport as a 6-year-old, when it says nationality, it doesn't say Ukrainian, it says Jewish. I mean, yes, there was anti-Semitism, but okay, fast forward to 2020, 2021, when Vladimir Putin decided, again, to now invade Ukraine. He did it under the guise that he was protecting the Jews that are in Ukraine. And it did, and yes, it should be noted that Zelensky happens to be Jewish, even though I don't know if he's a practicing Jew, but he's still Jewish by birth. The point is, I've been to Kiev, I've been to Ukraine. Let me tell you, I never felt the anti-Semitism there. I'm sure it exists as it exists here in the United States, but you don't invade a sovereign nation on that theory.
Right. And so, but Putin throws whatever against the wall and sees what
Yes.
sticks, right? So first it's denazification, then, or at the same time, they go Ukraine's an artificial state. Then it is, Zelensky's a dictator and we got to depose the dictator because there's no elections, even though there's martial law because there's the unlawful invasion. Then they launder into the United States. Oh, look, Ukraine's going after the Christians, and watch, they're attacking the Christian community there while Putin's blowing up the churches there. And so, oh, my home is being attacked by Zelensky. And by the way, just replace some of that stuff with all of, the stuff that Trump basically, the 2020 election is rigged, everyone's spying on me. And, it comes from the same playbook.
Yep.
And Cohen, to your point where you say sometimes there's some truth to these things, and then they create a broader narrative to achieve power. I mean, you take a look at Minnesota, for example, and there was fraud in Minnesota. You know who prosecuted the fraud in Minnesota? Biden. Biden's DOJ uncovered the fraud, which now the Trump DOJ and FBI is like, look, we did it. Biden's DOJ found it. By the way, there's like $100 billion or $50 to $100 billion, unfortunately, that takes place almost on a yearly basis with kind of Medicare, Medicaid fraud, and people looting government programs. It's something that happens. That's actually where the waste, fraud, and abuse is. And when you have a functioning DOJ, you go after the bad guys.
Hey, Ben, can we just stop for 1 second and remind the audience here that one of the largest Medicare, Medicaid frauds was by Tim Scott, who is the former governor of Florida. That's there you go.
That's where I was going next with that.
Oh my God. Really?
Yeah, of course. Well, you think
Sorry about that,
we just have graphics lined up for you when you
I apologize for that. I was really impressed for about a half a second there.
No, go with it. The editors are impressive. They anticipate where Cohen's gonna go.
That's one of the problems when you have what's called instant recall memory, IRM, which Tim Scott, who I have met several times, this is a guy who more than $1 billion in Medicare, Medicaid fraud. By the way, I can't tell you the number of what's that?
Rick Scott.
Exactly, Rick Scott. The interesting thing is, do you know how many members of Mar-a-Lago are committing the same sorts of fraud day in and day out? But if you're a member there and you're actually making let's just call it a gratuitous financial gesture, to the president or to one of his companies, well, lo and behold, then that's okay. Let's just say you're forgiven, right? This whole waste, fraud, and abuse, we all know that it exists. All right. It exists from the Department of Defense. Well, I'm sorry, the Department of War, all the way down to, I don't know, your local store that takes food stamps. There's always fraud, waste, and abuse in everything. It's just unfortunate, all right, but it happens. In fact, Ben, do you know that when they were taking money from the government, the PPP money for COVID relief, that there is right now, still to this day, and nobody talks about it, $1 trillion, not a billion, not a million, $1 trillion of money that is missing. Nobody knows where the hell it is. How the fuck do you possibly lose $1 trillion that you don't know where that money went? And that's one of the $3 trillion that Trump earmarked for COVID relief. By the way, if that was what was necessary to keep the country going and so on, I'm all for it. But there's $1 trillion of the three that nobody knows where the hell it went. There's another $1 trillion. So 2 out of the 3 are fraud, waste, and abuse. 2 of the 3 trillion, right, also deals with people who took advantage of the system. People like Jared Kushner, who went ahead and despite making, I don't know what it was, 40 million, 50 million a year just from managing Saudi Arabian money, that they took like 12 or 13 million dollars of PPP money because everybody thought it was free. How about take the money back? How about get the money back? It's not supposed to be a gift. I didn't take $1. I didn't get $1. I paid my taxes. They took the taxes. They used it and they gave it away. And nobody kept an eye on it. So don't talk to me, Mr. President, or Rick Scotts of the world, or Kushner's, or any of these enablers that are inside there about, for God's sakes, about fraud, waste, and abuse. You are the fraud, waste, and abuse. $1.7 billion by Rick Scott. What's the other? 1.3 billion, right, by Epstein? Oh no, Phyllis Formas. By the way, I happen to know him as well. 1.3 billion. Trump pardoned him. He was actually on the other side where I was at in Otisville. He commuted his sentence altogether, right, for money, plain and simple. This nonsense of using fraud, waste, and abuse, 100%. I would love to see no fraud, no waste, no abuse in the entire system. Not going to happen. Not today, not tomorrow, and ever. And you know what? Let's turn around and let's at least be honest about, where this fraud, waste, and abuse is coming from. And a whole lot of it, not 100%, but a whole lot of it is coming out of this administration.
Yeah, you give some of the stats. Trump has pardoned over 35 plus criminals who were convicted of committing over $1.7 billion in fraud. I don't think that even includes the latest Ponzi schemer who he pardoned, who was involved in a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme fraud with consumers and small investors getting really screwed as well. You mentioned Philip S. Formas, Medicare fraud, $1.3 billion. You literally have the MAGA Republican senator who's the main guy that they use as like their healthcare guy, Rick Scott. He made his money. Like, he got the golden parachute. He got $300 million personally as he retired and basically ran away after invoking his Fifth Amendment 75 times to avoid prison. So,
even your dogs are angry, as am I. Hey, this, I think, is a great time for my 2-finger salute. And I know this is going to be crazy because I promised in 2025 that I would not ever give the 2-finger salute to the president. But in all fairness, with all of this shit, when I'm watching, for example, individuals who stole $1.3 billion, all right, and then gets a commutation. You got another 1.7 billion in just 35 people. And that, again, as Ben said, does not include who, for example, like the crypto guys and so on, which probably brings it to a whole nother level altogether. It's fucking bullshit. All right. Let's all just call it for what it is. It's pure, unadulterated bullshit. All right. And you know what? Fuck you. Seriously, fuck you for doing that. All right. As the president of the United States, your obligation, all right, is to protect not just America, meaning the soil, but Americans, our values, the Constitution, and none of this shit that's going on right now. And I give him, everything always has to start at the top, despite the fact that he's being pushed by these enablers who are all doing it for their own financial and personal gains, just like what happened during the very first administration. Everybody figures out that they can stick with Trump long enough that they could make a shit ton of money. And that's all that's happening right now. It's these uber rich are getting richer by the second, while the rest of the country, all right, especially the middle class, getting squeezed down to nothing. And you know what? Fuck you guys for doing that, all right? And Mr. President, again, shit flows from the top. This is on you.
I want to thank everybody for watching. And because this will be our last Political Beatdown before the New Year's, our next episode's on the 1st, I want to wish everybody a very happy New Year. It's been an honor fighting by your side every step of the way this year. It's, of course, been a challenging, difficult, at times very depressing year, but it's also been a year filled with just being honored by your courage and your strength and the resilience of the American people and people across the world who have held the line, who have not backed down. And while institutions have crumbled, while people we used to respect bent the knee, and it was difficult for us to grasp to see that take place before our eyes, see that betrayal take place. New leaders have risen, a new group of leaders are here. And I'm glad that independent media has been one of the things this year that I think has made a difference, along with so much else. The grassroots organizers, the individuals who show up at No Kings, the people at home who just do their part every day to get the message out and to keep the faith and to keep the hope. That to me is really the defining word to me of 2025 is resiliency against all odds. And let's turn that resiliency into victory as we go into the next year. So thank you, everybody. Make sure you subscribe to Michael Cohen's other YouTube channel. It's called At the Michael Cohen Show. That channel's on its way to 1 million subscribers. You probably saw the Legal AF channel got to 1 million. We got to get Cohen's channel to 1 million as well. I want to see all the Midas channels hit 1 million subscribers. So go over there and subscribe to that. Subscribe to the Mea Culpa audio podcast. Go and check that out wherever you get audio podcasts. Subscribe to Mea Culpa. Subscribe to Michael Cohen's Substack. Cohen's a great, Cohen's a great writer. And I love his work. I love reading his work. And there's so many people that, Cohen's a really good
number
writer.
13 right now in the Substack list.
Let's go. A
lot of it thanks to Midas Touch Network, because they post my Substack articles on a regular basis. And I'm forever appreciative, Ben, to you and to Brett and to Jordy and to the entire Midas Touch team, Jeremy and Salty and Sydney, our EPs and everybody at the company. I can't tell you how important independent media like Midas Touch Network is, a place where whether you like what you're hearing from me or you don't, I know many of you get angry at me, but you're only going to get facts. You're not going to get opinions here, because if you want opinion TV, then turn on Fox, turn on CNN or MSNBC. But if you want it predicated on facts, this is the place to come. And let's try to get Midas to 12 million. They're about 6 million now. If each and every one of you brings one person, that'll be your job, right? For 2026, bring one person to this network, just one. You double it overnight. And then we're going to do it again and again and again, so that we could make sure that 2026, we'd be so big, so unstoppable, so vocal, so angry that nothing, and I mean nothing, can stop us, right, from ensuring that both the House and maybe the Senate too go our way.
Right. And the way I just want to say this at the end too. the way I define our way, is no matter what, this is what I want Midas Touch to be for now and in the future. Our way I define as truth, democracy, as empathy, as love, as trying to uplift and not punch down to marginalized communities. And so wherever that is, wherever that points, that to me is my guiding star. And I think one of the things that have been important about building this network is not chasing politicians. Where we've led with our values and our principles here and have led with the Midas way, what that is, let others join in that way, but lead with principles and values. And when you lead there, it's not difficult to figure out where you side on an issue because the values and principles guide the way for you. And so anyway, I'll leave you with that to think about. Thanks everybody for watching. Hit subscribe. Go check out all of Cohen's channels. And we'll see you next time on Political Beatdown. Happy New Year, everybody.